Okay, it's 3 p.m., so start the presentation. Hello and welcome everyone. This is the 5th session for the series, and today's session will be about writing a thesis. So today's agenda will be pretty short. I'll just be talking about the process for writing a thesis, and then a little bit about publishing, and then I'll end with Q&A like usual. So the process for writing a thesis actually starts when you're already enrolled in the university. Usually you'll need to be in your 3rd or last year of university to actually start writing a thesis. The first thing you'll do is find a mentor, and then you develop your research plan or your proposal, and you see if you need to get IRB approval in order to conduct your research, which I'll talk more about later on in the presentation. And then if you don't need approval, then you move on with conducting your research. If you do, you wait until you get approval. Then once you get approval, you collect your data, you conduct your literature review, you write your paper, and then at the end, you defend your thesis. And then after that, you can look into potentially publishing your thesis or parts of your thesis. Okay, so like I mentioned before, the thesis process starts once you're already enrolled at the university. So this is not something you would do before you're enrolled in a university. Mentors exist to support and offer guidance to students and student researchers during their writing and their data collection process. There are multiple ways you can find a mentor. You can, for example, go to your university department's website and look at the profiles for faculty members. Usually universities have information on faculty members' areas of interest, what courses they taught, what research they've conducted, like what journal articles they've published and stuff like that, and their professional background. Some universities might have a database that will help you find experts in your field of interest that you can use, and you can also use that to find like researcher profiles, research output, and engagement with other universities inside and outside of the United States. You can also talk to professors or graduate students or teaching assistants for recommendations. I think one of the easiest ways and probably one of the most common ways or the most common way to find a mentor is to just build a positive relationship with a teacher or professor or faculty member beforehand. In a lot of cases, this usually happens when you're a student in one of their classes. And you can build that relationship really easily by attending their office hours to visit professors or faculty members and asking them questions about course materials, about the field of study. And then later on, once you've developed a good enough relationship and you're interested in writing a thesis, then you can approach them about being a mentor for you. Your potential mentor might want some information before they agree to mentor you. So always ask if there is information that they want beforehand and be prepared to give that information. So you might have to talk about your research interests and your potential topics that you want to write your thesis on. You may have to address why you're interested in those topics, and you may have to give other information like a writing sample, in some cases maybe like a transcript or something. So once you've found a mentor, you might have to enroll in a specific course. Usually these courses are dedicated to independent study or to writing a thesis. And it's research or independent study that isn't already a part of an existing course. So afterwards, you'll develop your research project, your proposal, your project plan or proposal. And this will be used if you need to submit to IRB, but it's also good to have in general, just to help you plan out your actual thesis before you actually get to collecting your data and before you actually get to writing the whole thesis. So before writing your proposal, you'll need to do a few things first. So you'll definitely need to determine your research topic and your research question. You'll need to conduct preliminary research on your topic. So this means looking into the literature on your topic for background information, supporting the need for the research project. You'll also need to determine your research design and data collection method, and recruitment methods if your research relies on data from other people. So if your data collection method is interviews, then you need to have a recruitment strategy and method for recruiting participants for your research. And it's good to have these ideas even before you find a mentor. But if you do find a mentor, these are definitely things that they can help you with, since they most likely have the research background and the expertise to guide you on what like data collection methods or what research designs would work best for your specific research topic or research question. Okay, so the main components of your proposal will include the title of your project and your name. You'll also include a rationale or summary of your project, and that is where you describe what the project is about and why the research project is being conducted. You can also include background on the topic or key debates, issues, or developments in the topic or field of study that's related to your project, or even key points from your preliminary research. You'll also include information about your data collection and protection plan, and that is not only how you plan on getting the information or the data for your research and for your thesis, but also how you plan on protecting that data. So making sure that your data won't be accessible by outside parties, making sure that you obtain consent from participants in your research, that the participants' identities are being protected. So there isn't any information that is being publicized that can be used to identify specific participants. And you might also need to include or address whether or not you'll be collecting identifiable information or not. And that could be information like age or where the participant is located or the actual name of the participant and stuff like that. And you also include your project timeline. So that is basically how long you expect to be conducting research and how long you think the whole process will take you from start to finish. And then depending on what specific research topic you're you're writing your thesis on, and whether or not you need IRB approval or not, you might also have to include other information. So for example, funding information is included in a lot of proposals, your recruitment strategy, if that is applicable, your interview protocol, if that is your data collection method, for example, and then a risk assessment. And that's where you determine if your project will cause any sort of risk to participants that participate in your research. And that could be risks like financial risk to employment. So for example, if participants participate in your research in your thesis project, if that information were to be accessed by a third party and publicized, could that information result in financial loss? Could it result in someone losing their job? Could it result in physical harm to the research participant? And that is stuff you would address in a risk assessment. And then you might also need to include supporting documents. So that means either the physical paper copy or the physical copy online of things like recruitment, email text, research certification. If you're doing research with involving people, or if you have, won't be the case for undergrad students, but if you ever end up having a research assistants, they might need to obtain research certification, and that the document proving that you would include in your proposal. And then proof of funding if your project is being funded by like a grant, for example. Okay, so I mentioned IRB multiple times already, so now I'll actually define it. IRB stands for Institutional Review Board, and this is something that just about every university, if not every university in the United States has. And IRB is an administrative body that is established to protect the rights and the welfare of human research subjects that participate in research. So if you end up doing any research involving people, like if you're in like the psychology field and you want to do a project related to that topic, a lot of projects in psychology use human participants. So in a case like that, or even if you're doing a project that just involves interviewing people, you would need approval from IRB. A lot of universities let you take a short set of questions before you have to submit anything, and that short set of questions is used to determine if you actually do need to submit to IRB or not. There are some cases where that might not be the case, and there are some cases where that will be the case. So these like short surveys are meant to help you decide if you need to get the materials ready to submit to IRB or not. Okay, so this is an example of an IRB protocol that you may need to submit. So if you look at the screenshot, you'll see you'll essentially be filling out a form like this. It differs by university, but it generally has the same information. So you fill out the form and you use the information in your research proposal or your project plan, and then add any necessary documents and then submit it for approval. Once it's approved, you can start your research. And until it's approved, you cannot start collecting any data at all. You can do other stuff like a literature review because that doesn't involve human participants. But if your research project involves like interviewing people or conducting a test on people, then you can't do that part of the project until you get approval. Sometimes IRB might reject your proposal, and usually when this happens, they have specific reasons why. And in that case, you would just revise it. You would read their comments if they have any. They usually do in this case. You'd read the comments and then revise it, and then resubmit your protocol for approval. Okay, so once you get approval from IRB, or once you write your research proposal, if you don't have to get approval, you can start conducting your research. So that means you'll start doing your literature review and you'll start collecting data. Then you'll actually write out the thesis. So if you attended the previous session this week on outlining your paper, then you'll know generally in what order you're supposed to be writing and presenting your information. Once you've written your thesis, you defend it. Theses defenses are usually 1 to 2 hour presentations, and you're not presenting for the full hour or the full 2 hours. It's basically broken up into separate parts. So you'll first present on your research, and then usually what happens after that is that you'll answer questions from your audience. Usually it's not that many people. It's mainly just readers, people who read your thesis, and your mentor, and then a few other people. But in some cases, you're allowed to invite people to attend your thesis defense. So you answer questions from the audience, and then you receive feedback from the attendees. And that takes up the whole 1 to 2 hours. And then whether or not it's 1 or 2 hours long, and whether or not you have to defend it and get feedback from attendees, the process for your thesis defense will depend on your university and on your department. Okay, so after defending your thesis, you can try seeing if you can publish it. If you're interested in publishing, you should definitely discuss that with your mentor while you're still in the process of writing your thesis. In a lot of cases, universities will publish theses to their online depository. So it's not being published in a journal, like a well-known journal that isn't tied to a specific university, it's being published by the university itself, either for their own specific university-based journal or for their own personal library. And if your thesis is being published there, uh, you most likely won't be able to publish your thesis to like a journal outside of the university because it might be considered plagiarizing. A lot of journals require that you only submit research or like documents or theses or articles that have not been published anywhere else. So that's usually a reason why you wouldn't be able to publish a thesis to your university and to a journal. If this isn't the case, then you can try publishing your thesis or even taking parts of your thesis and then turning those parts into smaller journal articles that are more academic journal friendly and try submitting that instead of the whole thesis. And then to publish, you just identify journals that you want to submit to. So you should pay attention to the aims and the metrics of the journal for alignment with your thesis, research topic, and research question. And you should look at these things for feasibility. And that just really means looking at it to see whether or not you have a good chance of actually getting your manuscript accepted or not. You should also check to see what kind of research the journal accepts, since there are journals that might not accept theses. Some journals accept, for example, some journals only accept what's called original research, which means that they only accept research where the author or authors are conducting some sort of form of data collection for the research paper. So if you're doing research and it's like a literature review or a systematic review, which involves having to look through and analyze and come up with patterns for or recommendations for literature that already exists, since those are secondary sources, they're not primary sources, so they're secondary sources, and you're not actually conducting any data collection, there are journals that won't accept that specific type of research. So always check to see whether or not a journal will accept theses or not. And if this isn't the case, like I mentioned earlier, you can take parts of your thesis and break them down into small journal articles that you can submit for submission instead. And then once you pick the journal, you'll just follow the instructions for author submissions and then submit to the journal and then wait for any updates from the journal. So wait to hear feedback on whether or not it's been accepted or not, or if it's moved through to the peer review process. That's basically what will happen like once you submit everything. So it's pretty much just up to the journal at that point. Okay, so this is an example of journal information you would want to look at. So you can see on the screen under the speed/acceptance header, the acceptance rate for this specific journal is 10%. And there's also information on how long the process takes. So for example, it takes around 21 days on average from submission to first decision. So that means that if you submit a manuscript to the specific journal, you can expect that it will take around 21 days for you to hear back from the journal on whether or not they've decided to move forward with getting your journal published or not. And then that usually means that they'll then have people review it, and then the process continues. So you also want to look at the aims and the scope and journal information. So that will help you determine alignment. So aims and scope basically tell you like what kind of research the journal publishes, why does this journal exist, what field of study is this for, and then there's more information on the journal. And then there's also things like citation factor, and that's basically a form of determining how reputable the journal is. Citation metrics basically show like the average number of citations you can expect to get if you publish through the journal. So some have around like 2, others have like 8, and those can be the more reputable ones. I think if you're going into STEM, the numbers for citation metrics will usually be a lot more higher than the humanities and social sciences. And that's just because a lot more people and a lot more students and researchers and faculty submit research for the STEM field than for humanities and social sciences. Okay, you should also definitely look at instructions for authors because that will tell you what can be submitted to the journal, what you need to submit, and then how you need to submit it. So like word count, what kind of font you can use, what kind of English you can use. So some journals let you use American English, some let you use British English, some specify, some don't. So that means that either or any form of English is okay. And then if you don't follow the journal's instructions, they'll most likely reject your paper. So this is always something you want to read before you actually go through the process of actually submitting your manuscript for publication. Okay, so that is all for this presentation. This is a reminder that the last session will be next Monday, 3 p.m. if you're in Kazakhstan, and this session will be on presenting and attending conferences. So here's our contact information. If you have any questions after the session, you can contact my supervisor, Donna Nakayeva, through WhatsApp at +7 701-266-9680, or through email at dnakayeva@educationusa.org. You can contact me through WhatsApp at +7 705-985-7408, or through email at qtownsend@middlebury.edu. You can scan the QR code for the extra materials for the session, which I will add after this presentation. The document also includes a link to a folder that has the recordings from the other sessions that I've done for this series. So if you didn't attend the last one or any of the previous sessions, you can view the recordings through that link. And then after this session, I will have the recording for this session in the same folder too. Okay, so that is all for this presentation. Thank you for coming and for listening. And if you have any questions, I will be taking those starting now.